When you type sudo before a command, most people assume you're entering the root password and becoming root. That's not what happens. Sudo has its own permission system, its own authentication layer, and it doesn't even need to know root's password. Here's what's really going on under the hood. Here's the thing that trips up almost every beginner. When sudo asks for a password, it's asking for your user password, not root's. Root doesn't even need to have a password set for sudo to work. That's because sudo doesn't consult the system shadow file for root. It has its own access control list called the sudoers file, and it authenticates you as yourself using PAM, which stands for Pluggable Authentication Modules. Your user just needs to be listed in that file with the right permissions. When you hit enter after typing sudo, the first thing that happens is a check against the sudoers file. If your user isn't allowed to run that specific command, sudo stops right there. You get a message saying this incident will be reported and nothing else happened. If the rules say you're allowed, sudo hands off to PAM for authentication. Only after PAM says yes does sudo change your effective user ID and run the command. That effective UID switch is the key. It's how privileges actually change. This is the sudoers file, the brain of the whole system. Each line says who can do what. The columns break down as user, which hosts what target user and group, and which commands. The % means a group name. So the line granting Alice no pass WD access means she can restart engine X as root without typing a password at all. Bob can only run apt update, nothing else. The real power is that granularity. Sudo doesn't just give you blanket root access unless the rules say so. And you always edit this file with the vsudo command because it checks for syntax errors before saving. A broken sudoers file can lock everyone out. If you've ever noticed that sudo only asks for your password once and then lets you through for a while, that's the timestamp mechanism. When you authenticate successfully, sudo creates a file in var on sudo with a timestamp tied to your user and terminal. For the next 15 minutes by default, sudo sees that file and skips the password prompt. This is adjustable. You can set a shorter window or even zero timeout for sensitive accounts. When the timer expires or you close that terminal session, you'll be asked again. It's a convenience feature, not a security flaw, though some environments do set the timeout to 0. When sudo switches privileges, it changes your effective user ID to 0 ID to 0. That's root. But your real user ID stays as your own account. This distinction matters. The kernel uses the effective UID to decide what the process can access, so the command runs with full root power. But the real UID tells the system and the logs who actually kicked it off. That's why when you look at varlogauth.log, you see your username next to the sudo entry, not root. If something goes wrong, there's always a trail back to the human who ran it. That accountability is the whole reason sudo exists as a separate tool instead of just sharing root's password with everyone. So sudo isn't a magic root password. It's a policy engine that says who can run what, authenticates you as yourself, and then temporarily hands you the keys. Understanding that changes how you think about access control on Linux. If you want to go deeper, try reading Man Sudoers. It's dense but worth it. Thanks for watching Awesome Linux TV.